Brian Nisbet from HEAnet, who, as I say, has contributed to the programme both by supplying his talk and also helping with the programme committee. So Brian's going to be talking about HEAnet's backbone. Brian.
Hello. So, two bits that we're talking about today, which is our optical backbone and also it's a bit of chat about our schools network. So roughly half and half, and we'll fly through, yes, half an hour, so all good. So I'm Brian Nisbet, I'm the Network Operations Manager of HEAnet, the Irish National Research and Education Network. That is me, that is us. Those of you who've been to UKNOF before know I'm a big fan of Twitter. So, some very quick stuff about HEAnet. This is our mission. We have a strategic plan, bold, wonderful. And we're there, it's exactly the same as Janet. Our mission is there is to connect all three levels, primary, secondary and tertiary education, to the internet and allow them to avail of those services. Some stuff, we've been around since '83, the network, company since 1997, and we're now about 50 people, growing from 4 people back in 1997. We serve lots of people. It's about 1 million end users at this point in time. We are the one network in the country that everyone is going to use at some point in time. And the big bit is the 4,000 primary and post-primary schools, which we've added on, which I'll talk about in a minute or two. So, our network. This was the network in 1994. None of those link addresses are still... no, I don't think any of them are still live, so there's no secret information there. A network largely built by my colleague Dave Wilson, who's sitting there. He's claiming it wasn't, it's not his fault. But it's just to give an idea of what it was back then and where we are now. And there are some remarkable similarities because it's not that big a country. In 2003, we decided we were going to build a dark fibre network and lighted ourselves, and all the telcos were like, don't want to do that, it's a bit risky. You should stick with us and keep on giving us large amounts of money. So we built ourselves a backbone based on the fibre ring the ESB, the Electricity Supply Board, have around the country on their high voltage lines. So we got this roughly 1,300 kilometre backbone around the country, which I'll show you some pictures of in a minute, hooking into various metropolitan area networks around the place. And it wasn't quite 30 gig at the beginning, but it became so fairly shortly, which was fine for us. Again, you know, 1 million end users, and even then we didn't have the schools at the time, so 200,000 end users. And this slide was written about 2011, and we said we're going to be due for an upgrade in 2013, and it all worked. This is very important. It all came true. This under budget and in time, which is phenomenal. So this was roughly the network. What you can see there is in the top corner. Yes, that's the spur up to Letterkenny and Sligo, and the rest of it is a backbone around Ireland. And then we have another ring in Dublin. This is what we initially built, and the network today still looks the same because Cork hasn't moved, and it's all on still all on the high voltage lines, the fibre that's there. There is now a link which won't be shown, I think, on any of these, possibly some of these maps, which does now complete the loop at the top from Letterkenny back down to Dublin, which goes through Belfast. Obviously, Northern Ireland is somebody else's problem. It's part of the Janet network, but sheer geography just says that we do have some links through it, and we have had connectivity up to Queen's on occasion for some cooperation that has been done with Irish universities. One of the big problems with this network was that there were bits of lack of resilience. Several of our larger clients only had single points of failure in some of the optical equipment. So they turned around to us and said, we'd like some more resilience. Now, everyone in the room, this is not exactly a groundbreaking particular slide. 2 bits of equipment is better than 1. And we had been kind of going, well, that's going to cost an awful lot of money. And then one day, some magic blue smoke escaped from a server in a server room. Somebody hit the kill power button, and one of our largest clients was knocked off the internet. And then suddenly, yes, everyone suddenly found money to solve this problem. Amazing the way that happens. So yeah, I mean, the proposed solution was just going to be where there was one bit of optical kit, we were going to put two. So enhanced resilience. We also needed to buy new equipment. The equipment was getting on a bit at that point in time. The optical kit was about 10 years old. And we knew that the 30 gig backbone wasn't going to be big enough for us for very much longer. And we wanted to certainly put in place support for 100 gig. So there are 3 projects as part of that. The Dublin core ring, because obviously Dublin's the most important bit. The national backbone replacement, so again replacing that core that we showed. And then cleaning everything up afterwards and basically making sure that people then availed of that resilience, the layer 1 resilience, they availed of it at layer 2 and layer 3. So this is the Dublin optical network. The Blanchardstown, Park West and City West are our commercial data centres. There are lots of them in West Dublin. Somebody did ask one time about data centres in East Dublin, and we pointed out that they would need to float. It would be a problem. And then we have the data centres in our 3 client POPs, which are Dublin City University, Trinity College and UCD. So as you can see, what we did was doubled the kit in those locations. That was actually quite new kit already. It's the Adva FSP 3000 or 7s, and they were quite new already, so we just needed to add some kit in there. That was, relatively speaking, a simple job. As simple as putting in large amounts of fibre and new optical equipment ever is. That went off quite simply because it was just dropping in additional bits and making sure that the light was still strong enough to reach everywhere. The national optical network was a much, much bigger job. Again, the red dots there are the new POPs we were putting in place. We have cruelly cut Donegal off from the top of this map. But again, kit up there and also the kit that continues on from Letterkenny through Belfast down to Dublin. And we thank our good friends in Janet for their cross-border fibre, which makes that whole situation a lot easier and indeed possible, to be honest with you. This was a lot bigger because not only we were adding equipment, but also we were swapping out the older or6s, which in some cases were up to 10 years old at that stage. But again, not rocket science. It was getting that done. But the bit there, the network operations team, my team, we moved 7 10 gig circuits in 4 days. And the big thing was that we needed to make sure that as few packets as possible were dropped. And in fact, we didn't lose any operational traffic in that project, which we were very, very happy with. So this is the whole thing together. And here we do have the link across from Letterkenny to Belfast and down. And the idea is that there should be no single points of failure on that network. In most cases, there are some. Some of the bits aren't fully resilient across it, but there should be more than one route from almost all of those. In some cases, we have to supplement the backbone with provider links in order to get everything done. So it's not all dark fibre at this point in time. There are still a large number of telco provided managed links on our network, both for endpoints and in some cases for little bits of resilience in that kind of backbone setup. This is the kit. Any of you who've seen optical equipment before, this is optical equipment. I remember when I used to be very, very excited about kit and data centers, and then I spent too much time in too many data centers. But these ROADMs they're very cool. They allow add drop at whatever wavelength you want, and in multiple directions. I mean, we've got the 3-degree ROADMs there, and they are impressive bits of kit. We're again not using them to their full capacity because again, small country, but they're very good, very solid, and we're very happy with them in the network. And we're now doing some 100 gig testing on the network. Again, traffic profiles really haven't required that 100 gig at this point in time, but it is there. We've tested it. It works. So when we next have to move up another gear, we know that the network can take it. Again, I think it was that. That doesn't matter. But that's the optical network. I said it's there. It works. It's It's not doing anything that pretty much everyone in the room hasn't done. But project delivered in time, under budget, enhanced resiliency and room to grow. And then, of course, there's the operational reality. Has it given us everything we wanted? And pretty much, yes, we now have a very, very resilient network, and it would require 2 different fibre breaks at the same time to cut anyone off. Or it would require NOC engineers to not notice simultaneous planned engineering works on 2 sides of a city. That would never happen. No, no, no. Definitely didn't happen a week and a half ago. So, you know, human error is human error, and you cannot build a network which will protect against that. But we did have a situation where Waterford, Cork, and Limerick were all cut off from the internet because of planned works in one of the POPs, along with fibre work at the other side. VSB were doing repair work. Either one of these 2 events happening on its own, not a problem at all. No one would have noticed. Unfortunately, both of them happening at the same time on a Saturday morning, people did notice. So we're just very fortunate it was a Saturday morning just before term started, or because it would have been a Saturday morning during term, or God forbid, a weekday morning during term, it would have been a very, very different story indeed. And effectively at that point, there was nothing we could do because the work was ongoing, and we just had to wait for it all to finish. So it was about 2.5 hours, and I will have a certain amount of explaining to do to various people after we've built this network, which is a great pity because it really does. It is there and it is solid, and everyone's very happy with it. But it does mean a few people's SLAs for the year are a bit blown. So that's the optical network. I said it's simple, straightforward, does its job, covers the country, and we're very happy with it, bar the occasional small mistake, which is not the network's fault. The other big project that we've been doing in HEAnet over the last few years is the schools network. Now, the schools network came to UKNOF, and my colleague Donal Carroll came a few years ago to talk mostly about their monitoring systems. But I want to talk about the new network, especially the provision of 100 meg broadband to every secondary school in the country, which is 778 or so secondary schools. Again, not a big country, but geography makes things very fun, and that's something very worth remembering. So for the last, so that's since 2010 we've been delivering the 100 megs, and it's 100 megs synchronous. This is proper connectivity to the secondary schools, post-primary schools. That started with a pilot in 2010, and you could tell, if you looked at where the schools were, you could tell who was in government at the time. Clustered around ministers' constituencies, very, very obviously. But then they found more money down the back of the couch, which was impressive in Ireland a few years ago, enough to roll it out to everyone else. And it is one of the things that I will say, much in all, whatever your politics may be, this was a great decision on behalf of the Departments of Communication and Department of Education to do this. They really understood how vital this was for the school kids. We're still continuing to give DSL connectivity to the other 3,000 odd primary schools around the country. Unfortunately, the money to provide 100 megs to them just certainly hasn't materialized yet. But we remain hopeful. Sadly, there's still about 100 of those that are still using satellite connectivity. They may as well get tin cans and pieces of string, to be honest with you. But given that when we started there was in excess of 1,000 of them using satellite technology, it's great that that has dropped down to that number. There are just still places in the country that it's incredibly difficult to get any sort of non-satellite connectivity into. So the big difference between the schools connectivity and the university, the higher level stuff, is with the universities, we don't filter anything, we don't touch anything, we just let the stuff go out into the internet. With the schools, we have to very heavily filter what they're using. Everything goes through Palo Alto filtering boxes, and there's firewalls there, and it is heavily policed by a list which we're given by the Department of Education. We have the ability to whitelist and various things as required, but obviously it's very nailed down. Some of the adult education centres or colleges of further education which are connected have quite liberal filtering lists, but obviously the primary schools are a lot more nailed down. It's a sad reality. I'd prefer to have an open network for everyone, but it's just not it's not something that the government will allow, and seeing as they're paying the bill, they get to call the tune. We host basically everything. We manage a lot more for the schools than we would. Now the DMARC is still the router. We don't manage the school LANs. Other people do that, and some schools have very good setups, others don't, and I'll touch on that in a moment or two. So as of last week, we've almost got all 785 schools connected. We had said we would have them connected by the end of the year. The government then announced we would have them connected by September. This came as a shock to us when the Minister for Education did say this, but it's pretty much been done. And I should be very clear and not take too much any possibly of the glory for this. We have an excellent team who are dedicated to this network, and from the point of view of the network operations team, we effectively consider them to be a client. They connect at 20 gig into our network. So this is not me. This is a great team of people who led by Donald LaCruel, who do all of this. But like I said, 100 meg symmetrical bandwidth, funded by the government. There's EU funding in there, and but it leverages that backbone, and this is the whole thing. So this is, roughly speaking, the network. And those of you who've been paying attention will notice that this network looks suspiciously like the optical network I was showing you earlier. These are MX480s, the routers there, and they're co-located with our POPs around the country. So either our optical or our layer 2 POPs around the country. And the whole idea here is that rather than trying to bring all the 100 meg connections back to Dublin, we bring them locally. So some of them may only have 2 or 3 schools connected to them, with the option for more. Others have 50 schools connected to them, especially Cork and Galway and other large urban centres like that have a lot of schools coming back to them. There are firewalls then in the core, the 2 data centres in Dublin, and then they connect directly into the Cisco CRS boxes, which are the core of the HEAnet network. So this is the monitoring bit. This is what the network looks like. We added in the other map just to make you all feel at home. You know, it's not surprising. You have a huge cluster. The preponderance of those schools are around Dublin, Cork, Limerick and Galway. But as you can see, there's literally no part of the island that is not connected in some way. And one of the things we did with the pilot was we actually started with some of the really difficult ones first. If you look towards the top of the island, you see a little green dot kind of sitting out on its own in the Atlantic. That's Tory Island, and that was one of the first schools connected just to show we could effectively. And you know, it's been great, but the entire west coast, the Midlands, up mountains, down dales, etc., etc. So as I said, Juniper MX480 in every POP. These are the access routers, and then we have SRX 240s in all of the schools, along with the provider equipment that's there. As again, we've got something like 9 different companies who are providing those 100 meg links. Strongly discourage the schools from touching these things. That doesn't mean they listen. It doesn't mean that they're not randomly unplugged because someone is hoovering. You know, it's all the things you'd expect in a small office, essentially. The actual routing there, it's .1Q trunks. Not sure I meant to edit, but anyway. Single layer 3 VPN for the entire network, MPLS network. It's BGP between all the schools and the access routers. All of the schools are sitting in on the same private AS, and we're taking advantage of the Juniper configuration that just allows you to say accept a BGP peering from all of these different link addresses. So minimal configuration on both sides. Certainly the configuration on the MX480 for 70 schools BGP peerings is something like 8 lines of GNOS code, which is lovely. And then the provisioning is not using GNOS space, possibly for reasons that those of you who worked with GNOS space are aware of. They're using it to Tengen text templates, just pulled out of a database with Perl scripts at the moment. So it's still very home rolled. I think there is a wish to move towards a more official provisioning system, but the provisioning system has to be up for it. And at present, certainly what the schools have said is that the schools team has said is that it's not in a suitable position at this stage. So we built it, and they came, and and the schools started using the network in a way that we really hadn't expected they would really take to it. That school in Tory Island, 50, 60 meg average daily usage out of their 100 meg pipe, which was just stunning, and it was great. And we also knew that they weren't just watching movies on it or otherwise. They were using it for educational purposes. I'm sure they're watching the odd movie on it as well. But and that graph there is, well, it's this September is the far right hand side of the graph there. So as you can see, peaks, albeit fuzzy peaks because that's over a long period of time. But the 10 gig pipe, that's the interconnect between the schools network and our core. Their average daily one is 5, 6 gig. Obviously, it goes away during the summer completely. But every year we've seen, as 200 more schools have been added on, they generally take about a year to start really getting to grips with it. But it's interesting this year because we think the schools were kind of expecting it a bit more, that they're going to start using it more quickly. But this has been a huge driver of our traffic increase over the last while. I mean, and we look at certainly our connectivity via INX to Google and places like that. A good 3 to 4 gig of it is the schools traffic, which is huge. And we've had to pay a lot more attention to Microsoft patch days as well, and things like that, which has driven a lot of traffic. There are a lot of operational issues, huge geographic diversity, even in a small country like Ireland. Then again, I've been working with the nascent Bangladeshi NREN recently, and we've been coming to learn really what geographic diversity means when you're trying to build a network on what is effectively a river delta. But said mountains, hills, vales, many providers working in part of that. The provisioning has been a big thing to try and roll that out, because we're so used in HEAnet to kind of bespoke connections for people. That actually doing this on a mass basis for, first of all, 3,000 schools in DSL and then the 700 schools at 100 meg required a very big kind of shift in the way we would normally go about things. And there's huge variance in what each school can handle. So I'm going to show you a few slides, which are some of the stuff that the roadshow has been. There's a roadshow going around talking to a lot of headmasters and people like that to tell them when these links are coming to their school and giving them some of the information. So wireless is obviously a huge part of this, and they've been seeing, kind of showing, this is what we need to bolt to the side of your school, and then they go, oh right, these are all the insurance wayleaves you need to have. Fibre digs are nothing new to all of us, but this kind of infrastructure going into some of the places it's going into is huge. I mean, this is a massive body of work. You will now see playgrounds and car parks and schools around the country where you can tell the re-tarmacked bit where the fibre link came in, which is fantastic. And you have nice cabinets now, hopefully with the provider equipment and a bit of patching and our router and all the rest. It's all very nice. But we have to tell the schools, no, don't unplug it. Don't put it beside a storage heater. Don't mess around with things, and just treat it properly, because we've had some pretty big problems, like that one. That was one of the best ones we've come across. It didn't explode. We're not quite sure how it didn't explode, but the school is still standing. And a lot of the problems there with actually rolling things out came from the schools not having prepped the places where the equipment was going to go. And also, because we're not responsible for the LAN, it means that we provide them with this 100 meg connection, but in many cases they haven't been able to take advantage of it. And different schools have hugely different budgets to build their wireless networks, to employ IT people, etc. I mean, in many cases it is the person who unjams the photocopier is also the person who is responsible for this connection and for the equipment. So yeah, that's that's kind of pretty much that. That's two networks. Very quickly, there's a lot more I could say about both of them. But it's fantastic. We're now very happy with our optical network. We're immensely happy with the schools network and the fact that it works. And I think it is one of the great infrastructure projects the Irish government has spent money on. It's just not as trumpeted as bridges or hospitals or otherwise. But we are very much of the opinion, of course we're very pro-education, but very much of the opinion that this will very definitely help the next generation and generations to come of Irish kids to be used to having internet access from day one, and when they move on to third level, it won't be a new or scary thing to them. And in fact, in many cases now, secondary schools, you have people who have much better connectivity in school than they would do in their house, because unfortunately, no one's paying 12 grand a year to get them 100 meg to their house in the middle of nowhere. So, are there any questions? I think all the mics are over there, is the only problem.
Great talk, Brian. Jim Reid, representing Nobody. I was just wondering, now you've got all that great infrastructure going around pretty much the whole of Ireland, have you any plans or anybody discussed the idea perhaps for support for community broadband initiatives? I'm thinking of particularly in remote parts of Ireland where the existing comms were pretty rubbish and local schools might sit on a fibre connection, if that could then be used to sort of further internet connectivity for those other parts of the world.
At present, as I understand it, we're basically not allowed. And we have a very tight remit on what we spend our money on, and it must be for education and research purposes. Now, a number of those schools do allow usage, adult entertainment, wrong one, no, education.
Same thing.
So there is a large amount of usage there from the point of view of evening classes, and there is some community usage, but we can't then allow community broadband setups to route through that network at present.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Nick Hilliard, Annex. We had, of course, the broadband rollout in our school, and then we had a whole bunch of parents say that they were worried about the evil Wi-Fi rays giving their children cancer. What's happened in other schools about this? Because I mean, my BS detector went off the charts at that stage, and I just resigned from the whole process.
It varies hugely, and I'll be honest with you, I don't have the exact operational experience there because this isn't what I'm doing day to day, so I won't pretend that I know the full story, but it does vary hugely across schools. Some schools come in totally aware of what's going on, they know exactly what's happening, they have it all planned out, the parents have all been talked to and are happy. In other schools, obviously, you have people who unfortunately have listened to crazy people and are suddenly worried about their children being turned into mutants because of the Wi-Fi.
Are these things covered in the roadshow?
Most of them aren't, because again, we don't do the LAN. We provide the router, and then it's up to the individual school to provide their own LAN. I suspect the question has been asked, but I can't give you the full answer, Nick, because it's not what I've been involved in. But I'll certainly have a chat with the guys and try and get back to you on that one.
Hello, Craig Gallen, OpenNMS. You mentioned UKNOF space, that you weren't using it for provisioning, but what operational support systems are you using in your NOC?
So it's a lot of, again, this isn't my day-to-day job, but you're looking at a bunch of open source monitoring tools. Ticketing system is RT. It's running with, I think, Nagios still, although I believe they're in move to Ichinga. Cacti, there is a help desk which has limited ability to do things, and then any escalations come onto the NOC, who are running either with scripted provisioning, as I said, or just going onto the router and doing the work. But there's nothing terribly, I mean, while it's all good stuff, there's nothing terribly novel in what they're running with. As said, the provisioning tool rolls out the monitoring as well into open source monitoring tools. And I think, as I said, there is a wish to look at UKNOF space, but it's just not. It's not in a good state for it at this point in time.
Just a second question. With the number of schools you've been adding on, have you found that that's been a significant strain on your operations?
It's certainly kept them busy. Yeah. and they have been very, very busy over the last, and this is coming towards the end of the project now. So yes, it has been a lot of work. There's a team of 6 people working on that, and the majority of stuff, certainly over the last year, has been the rollout, with managing to keep up on any issues that do crop up along the way. But it has been huge, and I think they're all going to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief in a couple of months' time when the last school is, or as it will never be complete. This project will never be totally complete because of the nature of schools and whether they actually get plugged in or not. But it's I think that they'll breathe a large sigh of relief when the last school is plugged in.
Thank you.
Hi, Trevor Davis from LonApp and Trevor.net. It's quite. I had went into my kids' school last year to chat about what their connectivity is and stuff, and they had 40 megs symmetrical, and they never got anywhere near using 40 megs. And I'm just wondering, what in Ireland, what's the sort of typical broadband speed people get? Was it people are using the school one more because they get it so much better than at home?
It very much varies. In Dublin, you can get 100, 150 relatively easy from UPC, not symmetrical, but certainly relatively easily. Once you leave urban areas, drops like a stone. I mean, honestly, you're looking at 1 meg being good if you can get it in certain
Ireland,
rural areas.
There's a bigger proportion of non-urban areas as well.
Sorry?
There's a bigger proportion of non-urban areas in Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the government's rural broadband scheme was 3G dongles. So, you know, the infrastructure hasn't been put, money hasn't been put into that there. So that could well be a part of it. Certainly, I mean, if you look at places like Tory Island, no, it just, you know, the networking there was just not, it was 3G was the best you were going to get, and even then, you're pretty far away from a lot of things. So that could well be a contributing factor. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for Brian?
Oh, wait, is Donal rushing towards the...
One more.
If you're going to talk nicely to the people before you start deploying equipment into schools, could you please add that taking special care of the network cables when you're re-asphalting your roof is a considerable benefit, and yes, we have the photos to prove it. So please encourage them that when they are doing things going up to where their dish lives, re-asphalting involves an awful lot of heat.
Donal works for one of the companies that provides some of these connections. So, yeah, no, absolutely. It's the things you don't expect. Stuff like that and shotguns. People like shooting at things. Who knows? It damages fibre. It's one of the fun outage reasons I've had in my time. But anyway, cool. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian.